So I just want to say welcome first of all to everybody. Thank you very much for coming along to this is our first webinar of the year at Leading Resolutions. There's a mix of people on the call. Some of them are people that know us well, and some who don't know us well. So I just put a very quick slide up front just to talk about who we are. So apologies for those that know who we are, but for those of you that don't, a little bit about us. So we are a business-focused technology consultancy. We've been trading for 20 years and been highly successful during that time with a really good track record across a number of very big blue chip clients and some smaller clients as well. We do three main things. We work with clients on high-level IT advisory, which could be around strategy or architecture or a transformation issue, short, sharp engagements. We do pure play technical consultancy on a difficult technology challenge. And then we also do large scale program delivery with program managers and business analysts and project managers in terms of driving through that transformational change and really importantly helping the ROI come through and get accepted into the business. So that's what we do as an organization, and very happy to talk to anyone at much more length than that about what we do at any time. Tonight's is much more in that left hand space around advisory, because we want to talk about a topic which is really important to everybody. And actually, I would say this is probably the most important topic we could choose at the moment. The move to green IT and the helping on the move to zero carbon, which I think if it's not on your agenda yet, I'm pretty certain it will be at some point later this year. All of the moves around COP26, all of the moves around companies moving towards net zero carbon is going to be sitting on compliance teams' agendas. It's going to be sitting on executive team agendas and on board agendas and shareholders' agendas. And therefore, all of you who are part of the IT estate potentially will have this on your agenda at some point if you haven't already. And I think it's one of those really interesting subjects because it's one of those areas where there's lots of different ways to show that you're moving towards green IT, but often quite difficult to actually really move towards green IT. So we could talk about that. And none of us have all the answers here, but I think that hopefully tonight it's about trying to promote a discussion. And Mark, who to introduce in a minute, will take you through just a little bit of an insight into his knowledge. And as I said there, hopefully we'll create some food for thought, and love to take some questions at the end. The chat box is open, but we'll take the questions at the end if that's okay. You're all muted and will remain on mute. Sorry, just the way that the webinar's set up. Picture on the right there, that's not Matt Damon, that's not Paul Casey the golfer, that is Mark O'Neill. He's got various guys in that picture. Someone else said he looked like he's just come out of a boy band in that photo, but he's Mark is a long-term Leading Resolution consultant. He's also an expert in green IT and a published author in the field. So tonight is really Mark sharing some of his insights and experiences around the move to green IT. I'm sure it will promote lots of questions, so feel free to put them into the chat box and we'll take those at the end. But otherwise, I'll hand over to Mark.
Thanks, Pete. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar. In 2010, and in partnership with the British Computer Society, I did actually publish a book called Green IT for Sustainable Business Practice. And it was designed to be a body of knowledge to accompany what was the world's first certified training course in green IT. In the book, I covered off such topics as establishing a green IT policy, how to avoid greenwash, the key role in green IT, business and organizational benefits of adopting green IT, how to lessen the impact of embodied emissions, and how to improve an organization's green IT credentials. It's fair to say that in the 12 years since then, the need to adopt all of those learnings from more than a decade ago is as important as ever. And in the decade to come, organizations that are paving the way to a green future will need to undertake fundamental transformational change. And this commitment basically to fundamental change on every level includes political, environmental, social, and technical levels. And Danny, if you could just move the slide on for me, that would be great. And to that, you can also add both economic and legal factors as key drivers to how we determine our organization's path to sustainable IT. And basically, we're using, what most people refer to as the PESTLE model to identify all those factors. And Danny, again, if you'd like to move the slides on. So unfortunately, and without wishing to alarm you all, over a decade later, the latest research does show that we really haven't moved on very much, and that research also provides some very worrying findings. For example, in 2019, it was calculated that globally data centers alone represented nearly 1% of the world's energy demand. Also in 2019, we've got records that show that 53.6 million tons of e-waste was generated worldwide. And that's an increase of something like 21% in 5 years. And this is expected to grow to 74 million tons by 2030. We've got to ask ourselves, where is that going? Is that going into landfill? Is that going to be something that we need to be, aware of? The number of global IT devices in use is expected to reach 55.7 billion by 2025. 75% of those will be connected to an Internet of Things platform. But remarkably, 89% of organizations recycle less than 10% of their IT hardware currently. The International Data Corporation's recent Global Data Sphere forecast from 2021 to 2025 is predicting that global data creation and replication will experience a compound annual growth rate of 23% over the forecasted period. That's leaping to 181 zettabytes in 2025. Now, for context, a single zettabyte is basically equivalent to 1 to the power of 10 times by 21. But for easier terms to understand that, that's about the same data that will be held on 250 billion DVDs, if that makes more sense. Danny, if you could move the slide on, thank you. And the storage and processing of this data will in turn lead to an ever increased demand for data centers. And to put this into context, a major cloud computing solution provider operational footprint increased over 4 times from 2015 to 2015 to 2019. And the growth in data volumes will also lead to growing adoption of technologies such as artificial intelligence, and their performance is critical to drawing value from massive stores of data. And of course, all these factors are contributing to the growing carbon footprint of enterprise IT, and the digital acceleration that we have seen during COVID-19 pandemic, will further increase that footprint also. Yeah, Danny, if you could move on, thank you. What is very worrying is that many organizations, they don't view this as an area of concern. And in fact, 78% plan to reduce less than 1/4 of their carbon footprint through sustainable IT. And that's within the next 3 years. And that is also without carbon offsets. Now, in real terms, globally, enterprise IT by 2025 will have the equivalent carbon footprint of 463 million passenger vehicles driven for a year. And again, to try and put that into some context, a typical passenger vehicle emits about 4.6 metric tons of carbon dioxide per year. So the IT industry is now responsible for creating over 2 billion tons of CO2 every year, and that's only going to increase. And when you look at these numbers, And by the way, I will be happy to send out a link to each of the bodies of knowledge and research I gathered them from. So if you want further details as to where these where this information is coming from, I'll be more than happy to share them with you. But if you look at these numbers, it's extraordinary to think that sustainable IT is still not a priority for many organizations. Next slide, please, Danny.
Well, can I just interrupt you there very quickly, because I think
yes,
that's a really valid point you make around those plans. Now, we've been working with a couple of clients recently where they're very keen to start that journey and do some of these things, and we've helped them with looking at some of their IT assets, things like that. But how would you? I mean, I know you're going to go into planning, but I think it's really important. Do you see there being some form of legislation around this area at some point? Because you've talked about the size of the problem. Do you think this is going to lead to a government starting to legislate for companies to do something about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's it's already there, Pete. When we look at the outcomes of the COP26 meetings earlier on, or later in late 2021, there is already going to be legislation that's going to be not just on part of the IT industry overall, but on organisations that they're going to have to commit to with reducing their carbon footprint, and those will be reductions for organisations in every kind of commercial sector. Whilst there may not be specific legislation for the IT industry, I think what you will need to do is to understand that by actually investing in sustainable IT and looking at how you can reduce your organization's IT carbon footprint, that is going to help to reduce your overall organizational footprint, and quite considerably as well.
I think that's the reason I asked the question, is because you mentioned about comparing this with vehicle journeys, and of course the government set some very aggressive targets on moving to electric cars, no longer internal combustion cars being allowed after 2030 in terms of new sales. I just wondered whether you saw something similar happening in this world, because there's probably more impact in doing it here than there is in cars.
Yeah, absolutely, and again, there's, as I said, you can look at legislation that comes through things like the UK Climate Change Bill. You've got the UK Government Carbon Budgeting System, the UK Climate Reduction Commitment, and this is just obviously for us in the UK here. But there's a number of also sort of European directives. There's the EUP directive, as well as I said, more global directives around things like the Kyoto Agreement Protocol, and what's recently been an output from COP26. So when you're seeing that that there is a requirement now to secure near global net zero carbon emissions, that is going to have an effect on us in the IT industry, and yeah, that legislation will very much focus on our ability to support an organisation to be able to, hit their own commitments.
Brilliant, thank you. I'll let you carry on. Sorry, I've interrupted you enough.
No problem. Thanks, Pete. But what I wanted to say, I mean, I think the figures that in the slides that we went through previously are quite alarming, and quite rightly so. But what I wanted to do also is just to sort of also give some examples of where a number of the world's leading organizations are introducing measures to reduce their carbon footprint, and they are committed to becoming carbon neutral or negative within the next decade or so. So, for example, HP, they have a goal to increase the recycled content plastics across their print and personal systems portfolio to 30%, so 30% reduction by 2025. Dell are on target to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by 40%. Samsung has a goal to recycle 7.5 billion pounds of electronic waste by 2030. Google aims to run all its data centers on carbon-free energy by 2030. And recently, Amazon have invested 6.55 watts of wind and solar projects to power their data centers. And Microsoft are also planning to become, carbon negative by 2030 as well. And again, I can give you links to these articles that set out these targets. But when you look a little bit deeper into, say, what Microsoft actions are to become carbon negative, it's through a number of different initiatives. So, for example, that they're looking to shift to 100% supply of renewable energy by 2025. And they will have power purchasing agreements for green energy to ensure 100% of non-carbon emitting electricity is consumed by all their data centers and their buildings and their campuses. They're aiming to have to electrify their global campus operations vehicle fleet by 2030. They're looking to implement new procurement processes and tools that enable and incentivize suppliers to reduce their emissions. So there's that knock-on effect, if you like. And they're working with their suppliers to implement, consistent and accurate reporting and to pursue effective steps to make progress against, those scientifically based targets. They're also looking to accelerate the development of carbon removal technology, and they've currently committed to investing $1 billion over the next 4 years into investigating new technologies, expanding access to capital around the world to people, working to solve these problems. Now, by their own admission, this is nowhere near enough funding, but it is a start, and I think we should recognise that as well. So yeah, if we can, we'll stay on this slide, Danny, if that's okay. So you're looking at this and saying, so what can we do to make a start on our own carbon neutral journey? And the first thing would be to plan the approach, using existing project frameworks that map to, the age-old journey of plan, do, check, act, or as we see it here, we can assess, we can commence with governments and planning and implementation and improvement. So with regards to where we start, assessing our existing carbon footprint is essential, and we can do this in a number of ways. First and foremost, by baselining and benchmarking the environmental footprint of the enterprise IT, creating a sustainable IT strategy and aligning that to our global sustainability strategy. We will need to define key performance indicators, our targets, frameworks, and set carbon costs to IT operations. And this in turn will help to create the transformational roadmap for sustainable IT. When we're talking about governance and planning, that will ensure that all our stakeholders are committed to implementing sustainable IT initiatives, that we can align our services, our business models, and go-to-market strategy with sustainable IT goals and objectives. We may even have the desire to create a dedicated sustainable IT team to deliver the transformational changes. And of course, the implementation of our strategy, that will need to include multiple facets, including things like designing sustainability and software architecture, identifying the environmental impact of artificial intelligence, during our design and development stages, and making environmental impact a criterion for selection of suitable IT vendors and suppliers. And we want to develop a sustainable culture amongst our employees and our teams. And also the use and the selection and scale of sustainable IT use cases as well. I mean, these are just a few of the initiatives that organizations can start to implement. And there are many more actions that can be introduced as part of your continual cycle of improvement. And in turn, these provide numerous benefits to your organization. It's not necessarily about what we can do to make the planet a better place to live. If you're looking at it from a hard-nosed business perspective, well, if you're looking to invest in a sustainable IT program of change, that will help to improve your organization's profitability and its growth. It will improve efficiency and productivity. As Pete was mentioning earlier, we may have to adhere to legislative compliance, and so that will help us to do that. It also will lead to things like better brand perception, improved recruitment and people investment. People are going to want to come, all the good people, the best people are going to want to come and work with you and work in your organization. And where we focus on, data and insight and the chance to create an environment of fundamental change and innovation as well. And these are all sort of hard-nosed business drivers, if you like, that every organization will benefit from.
Mark, can I ask another question? Sorry.
Of course.
And I noticed Mike has just popped up on the, and Mike can come up with the same sort of question as I was about to ask in terms of his comment. He's asked about one of the clients he's working with is now looking to include carbon footprints as a requirement for services and engagements. And I was going to ask a question very similar to that around, as we help clients quite often with procurement processes and tender processes and RFPs, etc. And obviously we can, you can build into that process asking potential vendors and suppliers about their carbon footprint and how you can do that. What's your view on that measurement, how easy that is to measure and how accurate that would be in a process?
Yeah, it's a good question, Pete, and it sort of leads to that the accusation, if you like, of what we call greenwash, in where you would question an organization's green credentials by the way they measure what their carbon output should be or what their carbon footprint should look like. There is an organization called the Carbon Trust. They do provide a carbon footprint calculator that can be used in helping organizations to do that. And the Carbon Trust themselves, they describe a carbon footprint as the total greenhouse gas emissions caused directly or indirectly by a person, an organization, event, or a product. And any carbon footprint calculation needs to include the 6 recognized different chemicals that exist within the Kyoto Protocol. So in a roundabout way, I think what I'm trying to say here is how we measure a carbon footprint can change from organization to organization. There are certain tools that are available and that can help us to do that. But whatever the figure we come up with, it's always going to be a baseline by which we can compare ourselves against. So whatever way we decide to measure our carbon footprint at the beginning as part of our baseline, if we use the same measure going through the journey, then at least we've got something comparable to what we thought our baseline was.
Okay, that's really fair. Thank you for that. I think that's the end of your particular part of this, isn't it, Mark? In terms of this,
it is, yeah. So I'm going
to. I've got a slide which I just want to go through, and then I've got one more from John. Where John's going to talk about some things. Then but perhaps we'll come back to formal questions if that's okay. So I know Andy Hill had his hand up. So Andy, we can't unmute you, mate. So if you want to ask a question, you'll have to type it in the box. So I'm sure you'd like to ask a question of your old friend, Mr. O'Neill. So I the whole point of trying to talk about this is that we Mark's expertise, Mark's actually our practice lead around zero carbon and move to green IT. And we're always happy to help around talking around this. We'll work, when I see across our portfolio of clients, I see many who are very immature in this area, some very quite mature, some who have highly intensive compute requirements, some have much lower compute requirements. And we have the experience from the market, see what other people are doing and talking to people. But one of the things that we also can do is look at some quite innovative solutions. And John, our consulting director, is just going to talk to you a little bit about some of the areas around our innovation platform, where we can look at some quite innovative solutions. So, John, would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I think the bit I wanted to pick up on is we use an innovation platform called Leo, which is by a company called Leading Edge Only, who we partner with. And over the last year and a half, we've been using that tool to, when we've got particular wants or requests from our clients, is to use the platform to look at and see what solutions are out in the big wide world. We've used it for four different topics, I should say. One of them measuring the effectiveness of well-being of home working, that drawn about by the pandemic. A single solution to map an entire IT estate, rapidly scaling e-commerce platforms, and one very interesting one, business data on demand. But for this particular one, carbon has been, and getting on the right path towards a carbon negative business is very dear to our hearts, and there's a lot going on in our business ourselves to become carbon negative. But we set this this particular challenge, and the challenge was simply, how do you get there and what solutions are out there? And we didn't put any exceptions on this, so we opened it up to not just technology companies, but wider businesses such as the power businesses and so on and so forth. And we were looking for real innovation in this space. And a few of them really took us, our breath away, actually. One of which, a company who I can't pronounce, it's Macapre, who are moving into the electric car area, and they've got a novel way of, now we must find a way of getting the charging facilities to everybody, but the big problem with electric cars is charging them quickly, and they've used heat exchangers, and they're rolling this out in a couple of countries at this point in time. They're modular power smart process control units, but they use heat exchange to be able to power up cars in a really quick way. And that sort of innovation is out there. We don't know and we don't hear a lot about it, but it's there now. I guess the interesting thing that we saw, there were kind of two or three response areas that you could kind of categorize. One of which was around fuel, and we saw things like autonomous green power. Don't ask me what it means. I've read the paper and still don't understand it. Hydrogen fuel, again, I don't believe, and I don't think everybody believes, that battery is the full answer and hydrogen has got a place to play. And I mentioned these extreme heat pumps, about providing fast power on demand without a footprint. The second area that that came through around meeting and answering our innovation challenge was around AI and data. Mark's talked about modeling tools and so on. And there are some really interesting tools around sustainable business, but also about sustainable government and so on, and a couple of modeling tools that again were put forward, and this is quite broad, around pollution and flooding. So it was a long list of responses. It was our most successful challenge that we've ever put out there, and we will be posting the results of that challenge in the coming weeks and months. I did we did also get one reply, and you will see bullet number 5 down there, which I thought was a beautifully named business. I'm not going to use the expletive, but you can read it for yourself on the screen. So this is all good intelligence that we're drawing together, you know, when we open these challenges up. And, you know, I just thought I'd give you a flavour of the kind of challenges we're putting out there, the kind of responses we're getting. And, you know, please watch our website and certainly our LinkedIn page when we look and we post the results of that innovation challenge. But yeah, it's an interesting space. There are lots and lots of solutions out there, and you know, thanks for listening.
Thanks, John. So that's really, I think it's really interesting. I mean, the innovation platform that we have access to and partner with has been really useful, not just in this area, but other finding really innovative solutions and solutions which, you know, if you went to Gartner or something like that, you wouldn't find, because these are a little bit off track, off the world, but they can bring some really interesting ideas. Even if you don't go with the solution, they can bring some really interesting ideas. So we can always help with that. Danny, final slide, please, if you can. So I'd like to move on to questions. We're going to try and keep this just sort of like 45 minutes at most. So I've got about 10 minutes left. So we've got any questions, if you'd like to type them into the box. I've got a couple. Andy Hill was asked a question, which I'm going to read out to Mark and John, and you can take it, either of you. In the shareholder value driven world that most organizations are in, they will surely do anything if they can only going to do it if they can link it to shareholder value, which I think is a very fair point. So leaving aside the longer, you know, policy issues, is there enough, you know, monetized benefits, sustainable ITs, that will allow business cases to be made without that legislation point? Otherwise, people will just do it because they want to. What's your view?
I can jump in on this one, Pete. Yeah, this is the question, isn't it? We will want to do the right thing, but is it something that will keep our shareholders happy as well, and will it increase improve the profitability and the growth of our organisation? I think the question here is that there's almost, you know, we don't have a choice but to do this. Whether the shareholders agree or not, as we said before, you know, new legislation will come in that will ask for compliance. But I do think at the same time that the improved profitability and growth of an organisation can be linked to improved efficiency and productivity. And if we're using renewable energy, if we're looking at ways in which we can reduce our IT environment, if we can look at where we can reuse, recycle, these are all money saving. This is all money saving initiatives, and essentially, if we are able to, just for example, through using green IT initiatives, reduce our energy bills for an organisation, that's going to there's going to be good news. And I remember sort of many years back when I was talking about this to a number of interested parties. One of the things that we sort of laughingly joked about was, should we give the CIO responsibility for the business's electricity bill? We'll soon see how quickly that comes down, because you can look at it and go, well, for most organizations, a high proportion of their utility bills will be associated with IT, running data centers and and server rooms and all the different PCs and laptops and printers and other peripherals. So, sort of in a roundabout way, what my answer would be, Andy, A, we might not have a choice but to do this. B, yes, I think we can link sustainable IT to improve profitability and growth through improved efficiency and productivity. But also, is there going to be more of an inclination to invest in an organization that has the insight to move towards a sustainable IT future, and which will, will ultimately lead to better brand perception, which again just sits very nicely with those goals of the stakeholders.
Yeah, I think just to add, I mean, if you look at an industry very close to my heart, as people will know, Brewdog. Okay, you could certainly question some of their marketing and the way that some of their ethics in their business, but let's put that to one side. But they've really pushed the point about being carbon neutral and the only sustainable beer company in the world. A few have followed recently, but their sales and their their shareholdings and so on, their value around the world is massive, and I truly think they've got a great following because of their green credentials.
Yeah, I know Brewdog is particularly dear to your heart, John, so I know you know all about them, as well as Vocation and other breweries.
Yes.
I've got another question come in from Nigel, and I think it's a good question. It's similar to what I was going to ask, actually, which is, I mean, from either of your experiences, are there some quick and easy wins that you can show to the board to make a difference?
Yeah, I could answer part of that to start with, and then Mark, you jump in. But certainly, and there are a couple of people on this call from the lovely Central England Co-op who've made some of these moves, and that's the cloud adoption. You saw the numbers that Mark put up, and what the likes of Amazon and Microsoft are doing in the cloud space, and and really cleaning up their worlds, by moving in-house data centers, etc., to the cloud. There's a win straight away there. So that's one. No, it's not easy, but certainly we're helping a number of businesses to do that, and that is making them more efficient from a power consumption perspective. Mark, sorry.
Yeah, so John, I agree with what you said. I mean, I think a lot of organizations are now moving to specialist data center service providers who, by economies of scale, will be able to reduce carbon footprint due to the fact that they have the ability to run and manage our data centrally using renewable energy. And so you look at that and say, okay, is it a quick win? But there is the option to look at third-party specialist organisations, who can help us to do that. I think other things that we can do internally, appoint a green IT or sustainable IT champion within your organisation. It doesn't mean to say you have to go and recruit somebody to do that. There may be somebody who's already exists in one of your teams, who's got a real passion for this sort of thing, and who will help to remind everybody about what their own personal commitments are, and what you can do at a local level. And I think one of the messages we probably need to get out there is, to think globally, but to manage locally, and don't think that whatever small change that you might be making is not going to have a wider overall impact. I think, again, just a very quick win would be, for example, organizations to extend the cycle of replacing IT kit. If you're looking at your organization, typically perhaps recycling their IT infrastructure, and I mean peripherals like laptops, for example, every 3 years. Maybe that's what they're written off after. Extend that to 5 years, so that you're slowing down that cycle, which means that buying less IT peripherals, which means less which means less waste, if you like, and e-waste at the end of that. There are lots of sources of information that you can go to help you to sort of implement some of those sort of quick wins, if you like. But I think the first thing to do is we've got to try and embed that into embed that thinking into the culture of the organization, and whereas it becomes the part of the normal way of working with regards to how we perform as an organization and as an industry overall.
Thanks, and I think there's a couple of people from a very large cloud computing company who are probably quite relieved to hear you both say that cloud computing can help out here, who are on this call. But there's a question just coming from Michelle, which is a really good question, I think, actually, which is that whilst the drive towards all the sustainable practices we just talked about is absolutely important, isn't there also another side to this, which is actually to try and prevent the use of a lot of this compute power and data by actually putting in place really good putting in place really good retention policies around data, so we're not constantly just keeping everything forever?
Yeah, absolutely. Michelle's absolutely right to mention this. Again, another quick win, if you like, and I think this is helped by cloud computing facilities, if we can call that. One organization that I worked with in the past essentially had a remit within that organization that no one was allowed to send attachments via email. All attachments, or sorry, if it was a presentation, so if it was a PowerPoint presentation, if it was a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet, whatever it might be, you would then have to send the link to that document or to that presentation, where it will be stored centrally, maybe in something like SharePoint or on Teams. So what that then prevented was that duplication of data. So if you can imagine that you create a presentation, you send that presentation out to 15 people as an attachment. That's then 15 copies of that. And let's say the presentation is, I don't know, 100 megabytes or whatever it might be. All of a sudden you're up to 1500 megabytes, if my math serves me correctly. But you then, if you replicate that by somebody and sending that on to another 5 people, another 10 people, you get where I'm coming from. All of a sudden you're seeing multiple copies of the same document, which has to be stored somewhere. Whether that's locally, whether it's archived, or whether it's in the cloud. So, instigating a rule within the organization as simple as, not allowing for attachments to be sent on email, again, is a very good quick win to help us to reduce that. And the same could be said for setting limits on mail file sizes as well. There's all sorts of things in which we can do, but if we leave this to run out of control, as it seems, as we seem to be now, we're going to get into that position that I was talking about earlier, where we're just going to have billions worth of terabytes of data up in the cloud or even stored locally, and of course the processing power that's then needed to keep those to keep the infrastructure working, to be able to access that data, that then grows exponentially as well. So yeah, it's a very good point and something that we could tackle quite quickly, and it would make it would make a considerable difference. And again, costs, of course, because if you go to most cloud storage or cloud server providers now, they will cost, they will basically charge you on a per gigabyte basis anyway. So the less data we have, the less we pay.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Mark. Just a couple of others. Quick ones, and then I'll close off. But so we've just got a Thomas from AWS has just made a point, and I think, I'm not sure it was a question, but it'd be worth a very quick comment from one of you. So Thomas said that identifying proxy metrics in lieu of directly attributable carbon equivalent is key, and this is used the utilization of the instance rather than, it's not just a cost is not always a useful proxy metrics. It doesn't represent the level of utilization. I think that's very fair. So just looking at the spend with a cloud provider or doesn't necessarily tell you the carbon footprint, because it doesn't necessarily equate to what you're actually using. And I think that's absolutely right, Thomas. And I think that's key to looking at in procurement processes as well. So rather than just looking at a cost.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mark, do you want to comment on that quickly?
Not only in that there are initiatives that are out there. Again, when we talk about, I've talked about the Carbon Trust, for example, previously. You know, that it won't be long now, Pete, I don't think, before all organisations will have to present their carbon footprint on their products. You know, there are initiatives at the moment that say, for example, you can go to a supermarket, you can buy a packet of crisps. If you look on the label, there will be a Carbon Trust footprint on that packet of crisps that tells you how much carbon or what the carbon emissions are associated with that packet of crisps. So if we're labeling packets of crisps with their carbon footprint, it makes sense that we will also be doing that for all our infrastructure and service providers.
I really don't want to know what carbon footprint my packet of crystal might be costing. That might upset too much. It's bad enough looking at the calorie count. Last question from Nigel, then I'll come in one closing question. Is there anything else particularly urgent? Nigel said, how important is the creation of a baseline? Because you talked about collecting and measuring the footprint. Do you need to really important to measure the baseline up front?
Yeah, I mean, I can answer that from, and maybe John can come in on the Leo side. But I mean, from my perspective, again, as I said, there are, and you don't have to look very far to find carbon footprint calculators. They work in pretty much the same way as you do when if you've got an energy meter at the moment, where you're able to calculate the energy production of, I don't know, boiling a kettle. But the carbon footprint, having the baseline, is imperative, because as I said, you need to have that as a means by which you can then do your comparisons against as you implement the different initiatives to bring that footprint down. So yeah, from my perspective, it's absolutely essential that we baseline what that looks like.
Michelle's just sent it, or put a note on there, and she's absolutely right, and that's what I was going to mention, is that there are lack of standards at the moment. There's a lack of legislation around here, and if different tools are measuring carbon footprint in different ways, then we're at a loss. So there needs to be some sort of standardization around this, and I'm sure that will come in due course. But really good point, Michelle. Agree.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm gonna close with one last question. That's okay. I think it's been a really, really interesting discussion, and I think thank you so much for everyone's questions and attendance and being involved. And please feel free afterwards to send us some more questions and we can answer those. But I've got one last question, which is aimed at both of you. So if there was one thing that people on this call, whether they are a consultant, whether they're a customer, whether they are a client, there's one thing they should go away and do, which may be not just about their corporate life, but their home life in terms of green IT. What would that be?
Oh, good question, Pete.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't warn you about that one. Apologies.
I think, yeah, for me, more than anything, I think it's don't ignore the science. And I think that's probably one of the fundamental differences that I've seen in the 10 years since I first wrote my book. The science was pointing towards where we were going, but I don't think that it was relevant enough or developed enough for anybody to really take any notice of it. However, I think 10 years is a long time, and in that last decade, the information that's been provided to us scientifically now is pointing us all towards what we need to do, both individually and as an organisation, to reduce global warming and climate change. So my one key message would be, one, don't ignore the science, but secondly, as I said previously, I think think globally but act locally, and think about what you can do. I think for me, the one thing that the one behavior that I try to install in other people is to think about what they do around wasting, removing and disposing of their IT equipment. Please don't throw it in the bin. Please don't put it in a wheelie bin. It's only going to end up in landfill. What you can do, there are specialist organizations that you can you can send your disused IT kit to. They will recycle it. It will be reused. If they can't recycle it, if they can't reuse it, then they will dispose of it ethically. And for me, I think that's one thing we could all do, is be more responsible about how we manage our electronic waste.
I think that's really fair, Mark. And I think, Ramesh has just said a final note through, which I think we'd all agree. So all of us could just be aware we're wasting, whether it's switching off the lights or simply just attaching a big file to an email, or storing your photos in 14 different cloud storage providers, which many of us probably are, without even thinking about it. So absolutely right. So I think that's I think we'll close it there. Thank you everybody so much for attending. We will record this and publish it. And if any of you got any further questions you'd like to follow up with either Mark or John or myself, please just send us an email, get in contact in any way. And thank you very much, everybody. Hope you enjoyed it.